I got two questions for you. What do you do and how do you do it?
I'm a stockbroker.
Stockbroker? Oh, had to go to college to be a stockbroker, huh?
You don't have to. Have to be good with numbers and good with people. That's it.
Hey, you take care. Hey, I'm gonna let you hang on to my car for the weekend, but I need it back for Monday.
Feed the meter.
This scene is from the 2006 movie The Pursuit of Happyness, which was inspired by the true story of Chris Gardner. Homeless with his young son, Chris was desperate to get a different job that would change his situation. But how does a salesman of bone density scanners transition to being a stockbroker? Transitions to any new role are challenging, and that holds true even in CX, whether you want to get into a CX role or out of one. Jenny Dempsey, CX thought leader and chief learning advisor for CX Accelerator, joins this week's episode of Next in Queue to talk about these transitions. We discuss what a typical CX role involves, functions that often lead to CX roles, key skills needed for CX roles. Do CX certifications really matter? Free resources for CX aspirants and CX practitioners. And what does a CX career path look like? Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Thanks for joining another episode of Next in Queue. Rob Dwyer here again, and today joining me, very excited to have Jenny Dempsey. I've been wanting to talk with you for a long, long time, and you're finally on the show. Welcome, Jenny.
Hey, thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So we are going to dive into some questions about CX and career paths within that today. But before we do, I really have a question for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Would you prefer to be running CX for, I don't know, your favorite company, or singing or acting on Broadway?
Oh gosh. You know what? I probably would prefer to be running customer experience. I love the other stuff, but I think I love it as like a hobby, not a job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. I personally thought I wanted to be a singer, but it turns out that I can't hold a note to save my life. So my singing career was very short-lived.
Nice.
So tell us a little bit before we dive into this about kind of where you came from and in your professional life, and how you ended up in kind of a CX role.
Yeah. So I was in college and I was looking for a part-time job, and I went into our career center. At that time, the jobs were posted on like an actual cork board. And I found a part-time, tech support role at a local web hosting company. And I applied and I went in for my interview wearing jeans. I mean, it was a great time. I was very young and got the role. And I realized that this part-time job that I took on, I was pretty good at. And it wasn't just something to do and then study in between calls. It was like, ooh, this is actually fun. I'm learning a lot. The team was really great. The company was great. I ended up staying with that company for 10 years. going full-time eventually, moving from supervisor to manager, managing small teams, managing projects, process, all sorts of things. And it really kind of knocked me off my feet because I didn't expect that. I didn't think this was going to be my career. And then eventually moving into different roles along the way into customer experience, really gravitating towards that and realizing the power that that has. And also just it's fun and it's exciting and it's cool. Every day you learn something new. There really is never a dull moment. And that's pretty much it. Moving to different companies, learning lots along the way.
Yeah, I think that's a really common way for people to end up in that world is coming up through support or through customer service. I think one of the things that we should do before we move forward in this conversation is really just kind of try and take a stab, and this may be difficult, at what a typical CX role involves. And I think there can be a lot of different things, but you know a lot of people in the industry. Obviously, you've held a number of different CX roles. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you're typically responsible for?
Yeah. So what I've noticed is that customer experience can fall under two categories. It can either fall under customer service or it can fall under marketing. There might be some other variations along the way, but those are the two that I've experienced throughout my career, one of those two departments. And then depending on which one you're in, they'll always involve a mix of the two. So even though you're under the marketing umbrella, you're still going to have customer experience and customer service and project management, program management. You're going to have process that you're going to have to develop strategy. You're going to have to develop knowledge-based management. So while they may be separate in different departments, they're really a lot of hats, kind of like we were talking about earlier. You're going to wear a lot of hats. And it can vary from company to company based on what they need you to do. But a lot of the roles that I've been in with the blend, like I've been a manager of the department or even a director of the department and on the front lines at the same exact time. And so I'm responsible for the strategy and building everything out in the projects, but I'm also responsible for responding to the Instagram DMs and the emails that come through and the chat support. And it really is a wide variety.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a role where that getting into the weeds has a huge impact, maybe more so than a lot of director or executive level roles, because when you're talking about customer experience, it's really hard to be strategic about it if you don't actually understand what that customer is experiencing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. And this, like, being able to be in these roles where you can, be on the front lines in those weeds, but also take all that feedback and learnings and then communicate it to stakeholders, the higher up C-suite, whatever you need. But like, you have to have a mix of both because if you have to like bridge the gap in a way to different teams, even if you're like, you need a bug fix, you got to go to engineering and you need to have a way to communicate what it is, the value, not only to the customer, but why it needs to be priority. We speak the language of the engineering team. What are their priorities? What's going to work for them? So you really have to fine tune priorities and values, both from the customer, both from your angle, because there could be something that's really just bugging you that needs to be fixed, but also from the level of the teams that you're working with and the people that, are going to either make the changes or give you the budget to make the changes. So.
Right. Yeah, it definitely requires a broad knowledge too of the business, because it's not just understanding the customer service side or the sales side. Like you talked about, I need to have a way into engineering if I'm working for a SaaS company, and I need to be able to have some type of vision into procurement if I'm working for a retail company or some other type of service company. So you need to be able to reach into all those different departments so that you can have influence among lots of them. Mm-hmm. One of the things that leads me to is I wonder, can you talk to us about how the role might be different depending on my business, my product, or my service? Because I imagine there's a big difference between someone who's doing this work in a retail environment or an environment that has a retail presence versus like SaaS, which typically doesn't have any type of retail presence.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's going to be so many differences. Obviously, if you're working with customers face to face, you're dealing with inventory. A lot of it is all very similar. The way that your mannerisms, body language, tone of voice, things like that on a very basic level. Customer journey. When someone walks into a retail store versus when someone loads your website or goes to your online store, there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, the journeys will be different, but at the end of the day, I kind of just like to always loop it around to something super simple that's helped my brain connect the dots, but it's just people helping people. From customer service, customer experience, like it's all just people helping people. And so when I think of it all like that, no matter what industry it is, again, obviously there's going to be so many differences and rules and policy and blah, 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 but it's just people helping people. And that kind of, I don't know, it keeps me grounded when I'm working with customers, because especially in retail, like I don't know, I worked at a coffee shop and people threw coffee at you if you don't make it right, and it's like things like that where it's like, okay, you're going to have to deal with like wild things, but it's like at the end of the day, it's just people helping people and, building relationships with your teammates. And it just comes down to these basics, no matter what, at least for me, that's what makes sense for me. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like we have made this big deal about how awful customers have been the last few years. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because I think it's been a hot minute since you worked in the coffee shop. And even then, right, customers could be awful depending on how things go. Do we sometimes get too immersed in how we view customer attitudes and whether or not they're good customers or bad customers, or they're just not playing nice anymore?
Well, I think, expectations have arisen and technology has made it easier to get certain things. So if it's possible with one company, then the expectation is it's going to be possible with every company, no matter small business or large business. People think, I don't care if you don't have the budget, like make it happen or else I won't buy from you. Or, something breaks and they have to wait on hold for a really long time. People just get, angry or whatever. So there's a lot of expectations that have risen. And there's a lot of, I guess, I don't know how to put it, just like with the way the world has been over the last few years, emotional kind of uprising and a focus more on like, I don't know, just like mental health. And so I think a lot of people are kind of tapping into that. And sometimes, for better or worse, when they contact customer support, they may forget that there's another person on the end of the line, or vice versa. It could be a customer service agent who forgets the customer is a human on the other line. So it goes both ways. It's not just customer being a jerk, but I think that, it's a matter of tailoring the business to those expectations. And as far as good and bad customers go, I don't know. I mean, some customers are really like feisty and they get all angry, but what they're saying is completely valid. And it's like, oh my gosh, if I make these changes, we might bring in more sales. Like this is great feedback. But then there's also abusive customers, and that it's not tolerated. But I think, companies have to be very clear about what isn't tolerated and communicate that to the customer, set boundaries, protect their team. Obviously, if someone's life is being threatened or hot coffee is going to be thrown in their face, or, whatever it is, you have to be prepared and be cautious. But, a good customer doesn't, there's great customers, there's bad customers. At the end of the day, we have to listen to them all and we have to set the right boundaries.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about really how someone gets into customer experience. I feel like this is a term that sometimes is a little bit nebulous, but there are a number of different roles that you could have in a customer experience organization. Where do you typically see people coming from? Like what type of departments or functions have you seen them coming from? And then we'll come back and expand upon that.
So I think I have seen a lot of people come from marketing and a lot of people come from user experience, and they want to land more of a relationship building role in customer experience. So they, maybe part of their jobs that they really gravitated towards was, more of the relationship building or the actual experience of the customer or something else similar to that. And, marketing can sometimes be a little removed from the actual customer, same with user
Mm-hmm.
experience or data and analytics. And they want to get a little more personal. So I've seen a lot of people move from those departments, but also just business in general. People just feel more connected to the customer and they want to, biz dev or whatever, moving from there to customer experience, customer success. Sometimes people in customer success roles, it's really more of a sales role, which is excellent for some people. And some people are like, I don't want to do sales, but I want to help people. And
Right,
so they'll
right.
move from that into customer experience. So those were kind of like the three main ones that I guess that's four, like main ones that I've really seen people move from to go into customer experience.
So the answer to this question may vary depending on where
Yeah.
those people are coming from, but what skills do people need to develop or focus on to get into that CX type of role? What's different about that type of role versus what they were doing before?
Well, I think it comes down to, I mean, you're working with people and you're working with customers in general. You have to develop a lot of patience. You have to maybe have that naturally. If you don't and you can just make it work, cool, that works too. And I think soft skills, well, and I say that in air quotes because soft skills are kind of a hot topic and they're just people skills.
Yeah.
But I think those come in handy when you're in a customer experience role. I think that, there's so many different ways that you can be in customer experience, whether your strategy or your more data or analytics, or your more like voice of customer, or, your surveying and research side, like, or your frontline. Like sometimes people call customer experience, but it's really customer support and you're on the front line. Like it can vary. And so I think it just comes down to the people skills are really going to leverage you in the role. Everything else is trainable. But
Mhm.
obviously, if you're getting into an analytics role in customer experience and you hate numbers, probably not the best fit. But like, read the job description before. I mean, that's just for me. Because I didn't go to school for customer experience. There's so many things out there now that you can go to school for, so many certifications and trainings. I just, got into it at a great time and I've continued my career, and that everything that I've learned has been from experience, been from actually doing it, making a crap ton of mistakes and then learning from it and doing better. And so I think like, if you want to do it, then really leverage the people skills. That's what's helped me. That's, focus on relationships, focus on, helping others and taking care of yourself and making sure that, you know, all that kind of comes together in the role and everything else is trainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought up some of the resources that are out there now. There are a lot of certifications,
Mhm.
and a variety of different ones out there. Uh, at one point, and it's been a while, but Alex Mead and Colin Shaw kind of got into a little bit of a this over certifications, and they actually did a podcast about it. And Alex's contention was, we've got all these certifications out there, but they're, number one, certifying people that haven't actually done anything,
Mhm.
right? And so you're talking about how you learn by making mistakes and figuring it all out. And his fear was that then people are hiring these people who may have learned some theory,
Yeah.
but haven't actually ever worked in a role where they had to implement different things to improve customer experience.
Right.
What are your thoughts on certifications? I mean, are they worth it? Because there are a lot out there and they're not free.
Yeah. Oh, such a hot button topic. You put me on the fire. Oh man. Well, okay. Like for me personally, I'm going to just speak from me personally because it's different for everyone. A certification may benefit someone, but for me, I mean, if my employer paid for it, I would be open to it because there's always something new to learn. And I feel like after my experience in the industry for almost 20 years, it would be cool to learn more. However, would I do it on my own? No, probably not. And the reason for that is because I just learn more doing the work. If someone chooses to, or actually, let me take a step back. If I were to think back to my early days in the career and I were to just take the course and get a certification and then go do the work, I think it would have put me at a disservice. I think it would have set me up with ideas in my head of how to do things instead of listening to the customer and then doing things, or talking to my teammates, or thinking of my own ideas, or being intuitive about what I know about the company. I think, having this blank canvas helped me, freaked me out because it's scary not knowing the answers all the time, but it also set me up for success by asking questions and being curious. If I would have had, a program that said, do it this way, I might not have thought outside the box. I might not have been as creative. I might have felt a little scared to take risks. So I think it varies person to person. Obviously people should do what's best for them, but that is my experience. So.
I love that. One of the things that I think is when it comes to being successful in a role that the answers are always changing, being willing to ask questions and not say, I definitely have the answer, we need to do it this way, is a real asset, because things are constantly changing. And so being able to step back and think, okay, are our customers meeting us in the same place that they were 5 years ago? And I think most of us can look at it and go, no, that's not what's happening. And so if I wasn't able to ask the right questions and adapt to customer changing preferences, I'm putting myself at a disadvantage and my entire organization at a disadvantage. Yeah. So I love that, just having that questioning mindset.
Yeah, I always ask so many questions just because I don't know everything. I want the help. I want the guidance from others and to use our team. And it's so great to be in a role where, I love it when people come to ask me questions. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can, expel some wisdom on someone else. And then I know I can go to them when I have questions and get that in return. And so it really, I don't know, it's a type of teamwork. So,
yeah. Well, and I talked about how these certifications weren't free, but there are free resources to help you learn, understand, people that you can reach out to. In fact, you are one of the community organizers for the CX Accelerator community. Let's talk a little bit about that community and what's the purpose and what kinds of things could people find there if they're not familiar with it already?
Oh, absolutely. I could talk all day about this. CX Accelerator is, it's a global community of customer experience, customer service, customer success, anything customer. We're all in the same space. We're all talking about customer service, sharing our experiences, talk about asking questions. There's a whole channel dedicated to Ask Me Anything. If you have a dilemma at work, think about all the time you're sitting there, your mind's spinning, go into the Slack channel at CX Accelerator, post it. You can get insights from, professionals around the world. And then you can pick and choose. You're like, oh, okay, here's what to do. Like for free, for absolutely free. I started a customer service blog, in 2012 with my former boss, Jeremy Watkin. You might know his name too.
He's a friend of the show.
Yeah. And we started that when we were working together because we would talk about customer service all the time. And our, family and friends were like, okay, we heard enough. We're tired of you talking about customer experience. So we're like, oh, let's start our own blog. So we started that. And like through that, we met Nate Brown and, over the years, kind of connected of this, how do we build a community out of this? And there are so many great ways to do it. And Nate Brown really took it by the reins and created this community that now expands around the world and just help so many people, whether it's leveraging, them for asking questions, careers, finding a new job, talking about different type of tools to use, getting recommendations. Nothing is silly. Nothing is off limits. It is like, I can't say enough good things about it, just because it is such an incredible wealth of knowledge at your fingertips for free, for absolutely free.
Yeah.
And so there are so many days that I've been struggling with something at work and I'm like, I don't really know what to do about this. I'll post, and then boom, here's so many different ways. And then people send you direct messages. Hey, how's that going? I want to just check in, make sure you're cool. Like, can I offer any support? You want to hop on a call? Like, and these are people that have been in the industry maybe even longer, than I have, or they're consultants, or, they're just really wise, cool people. And it's awesome to be included in that community. And again, anyone can join. So it's a great place to start if you're not sure what the heck you're doing in customer experience, and just go there and read things and ask questions.
Yeah. So my testimonial, I'm going to go ahead and give the
Do it.
testimonial, was that this podcast episode actually came about because I had a question and you were one of the people that responded to me. And during that discussion, I was like, hey, by the way, I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for quite some time, so let's do it. And so that's how this came about. And so I found answers that I was looking for from a variety of different people, and it gets you, number one, it may just reinforce what you are already leaning to, or it might open up a different line of thought. And the people there are very willing to just have a chat with you. Like, hey, if you want to talk about this in more detail, let's set something up and let's talk. And I do think that if you want to, let's say you're trying to move into a new role, whether you've been in CX before or not, being able to just kind of lurk and then ask questions, that's a great place to go that doesn't carry with it the kind of financial commitment that some certification might have with it. You can probably learn a lot of the same things.
Right. Yeah. So true. So true. And it's also, just to kind of add on top of that, Rob, it's not salesy. Like, I think a lot of people think like, oh, a company must be putting this on and they're probably going to ask me to buy the product eventually. Like, that's not the case. Like, it's a group of volunteers and we put this together with our own spare time. And, we're not associated with any business, and we moderate what's posted. So if someone is being real salesy, like, we'll have a conversation like, hey, let's talk about this and dial it back a little bit and see, maybe there's a different way to connect with people. So it's a safe space. You're not going to get like all these sales pitches. So
yeah, and I can attest to that as well. So I wonder, where do you see the next path, or where have you seen people go from maybe leading CX in an organization? Do people move into other roles as a progression?
Yeah, I have definitely seen that. I actually mentored a young woman for a couple years who was doing frontline customer support and then management and knowledge-based management. And then eventually she was like, you know what, I want to move away from this and move into user experience. It really like fueled her interest in the user experience. And she had zero experience in user experience. And that's a very competitive, role. And so it took her a while to find a company that was willing to say, you've been in customer experience, but you have no user experience. And at that point, like, she, eventually found that company, got, taken on, and is excelling in her career. And many other stories like that I see, like people post in CX Accelerator, or you read it on LinkedIn. A lot of the times people gravitate towards marketing. Kind of the way that they come into customer experience are also the way that they kind of go out, like community management or social media management, content creation, other ways to connect with customers. And I think it's so valuable for someone being in a role of customer experience, having that, perspective of the customer's eyes, like being able to, you get it. And then you go into marketing and you can really bring things, back to where you are. Even gosh, even the woman who sold me my car like years ago, she was like, I was on frontline customer support at the particular dealership that I purchased from. And then eventually she moved into sales and she's rocking it. She was incredible. I continue to go back every single time my lease is up to buy a car from her because she just gets it. She's not this salesy, slimy person that we normally hear about. She gets it. She was on the front line. She knows what to do. And so I think when we see things like this, you can really move from so many, you can move into so many places when you have that experience working with customers.
Yeah, you bring sales up, and I think this is really important to recognize that really good salespeople aren't salesy. They're consultative.
Yes.
And, Jason Cutter talks about this all the time and his sales method. And he really wants people to think of sales in a different way. And to your point, when you have been working with the customer, see things through the customer's eyes, if you then make that pivot to sales, you're very likely to continue to focus on what's best for the customer, which may mean, you know what, I am not going to sell to you because this isn't right for you, or I'm not going to sell this thing for you because it's not the right thing for you. It's not going to fit your needs. And a lot of people get into sales straight away without having that type of experience. And so they're just focused on make the sale, make the sale, make the sale, make those numbers. And if you can have that more holistic view, not only will you be good at sales, but you'll have really satisfied customers, because there's nothing worse than the customer who got the sale and then they're unhappy because they got the wrong thing.
Right. Gosh, it's so true. It's so true. You just have that broader perspective and the ability to connect in a different way. And you know the product in and out. And I think it also depends on the company, because some companies are very likely to push sales teams to, meet a certain quota. And they might not give the flexibility to, upsell really only when they need it. It might just be upsell no matter what. So I think it comes back also to maybe some company culture in there and along the lines. But yeah, if you have that experience, you get people, you get the product. There's nothing worse than, I remember early on, their sales agents, and this was just, one example of it, but frontline customer service, we get calls in and they'd be like, oh, well, the salesperson told me that this is possible. And we're like, well, that's not. And then it's like, oh my gosh, if the sales team knew what was possible, how much better we could actually support these customers. And so kind of connecting the dots there between teams. But yeah, sales gets a bad rap. And I didn't mean to say like slimy before. I know that's a stereotype. I apologize for throwing that out there, but buying a car sometimes can get that rap, but not all salespeople are slimy. They're really great, relationship builders. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I know also from a very similar experience, right? When you find the person that sells the right way, even in the car industry, like you want to go back to them. And that's very much a long game, because I'm not replacing my car every month, right? Hopefully. If I am, we probably need to have a conversation about how you drive. But like those people who make you feel a certain way and you have that trust with them, not only are they able to sell to you again down the line, but you're also probably going to say, if someone is talking about buying a car, say, hey, I know this really great person over at X dealership. You should go check them out. Mm-hmm. And that's like the most powerful business driver, the most powerful advertising you can get is that word of mouth piece.
Right. Totally. It totally is. So many companies I am loyal to simply because a friend told me about them and had a great experience, and vice versa. I've told so many friends about companies that I've been to, and they'll continue to go to them just because of the stories that they heard. So it's so true. And it's so powerful.
Yeah. And that is absolutely part of CX as well. Like we don't always think about it that way, but your sales experience and the interaction that you have with that, whether it's a department or the website or whatever the case may be. I mean, that absolutely informs your experience.
Totally. Yep. It's part of the whole journey. Absolutely.
So we have talked about a lot of different things, and I don't know that we've got all the answers, but I'm wondering what you're thinking about through this conversation that maybe we haven't touched on, or maybe you have a burning question that you want to talk about.
Well, I think one of the things that kind of comes up for me is that, people, when you do work in customer service or customer experience, it can sometimes feel like, actually, let me bounce back for a second. We talked a lot about people who are in customer experience roles, possibly moving on to, other types of roles, whether that be in different departments or even just a different, leadership role within customer service or customer experience. And that can sometimes be really challenging to do. Sometimes, if you just had frontline experience, you may not feel prepared to take on larger tasks or move into a different department. My example of the woman that I mentored, it was really challenging for her to get experience in a totally different role that she didn't, have that, knowledge in yet. And so I think one of the things that keeps coming up for me is I see more and more layoffs, online.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn, and there are posts after posts about layoffs, and a lot of them are customer service or customer experience. And there's so many new roles out there. Other companies are hiring, and they're, looking for certain, types of the same roles. And so it's like, we have this, if you get laid off from a customer experience role, you have this decision, like, do I stay or do I go? That kind of question. And so I think really thinking about what you gravitate towards in customer service and customer experience is a great thing to start doing. If you're like, not all companies do career path planning. How do you do it for yourself? Do you go do something different? How do you know when it's time to do that? Versus, oh, I'm just going to look for the same type of role that I was already in and doing for the last 20 years. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like, that's just kind of something that's been on my mind. The more I see these posts, the more I see, the culture shift on what does work life really look like, in remote work and having more flexible, roles. And so just kind of digging into what does a customer experience or customer service career path look like, what options are available, and how do you actually go into a different department if you don't necessarily have the experience, but you do have the experience of working with customers.
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And you and I are both seeing the same thing, right? I mean, we're both relatively active on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is there, and Twitter are kind of the first places that you hear these things. And we're seeing all of the really large tech players, with a few exceptions, trimming their sails, as it were, and CX is absolutely often included in that. My take is that ultimately those like, if you're good at building relationships and you're good at communicating, there are all kinds of things that you can do and value that you can bring to a company, even in a different type of role. But you're right, it is hard because companies, and this is true no matter what you've done in the past, it's not a CX thing,
right?
You get pigeonholed, right? This is what you've done, this is what you're good at. And I think every hiring manager, whatever that role is, should keep in mind that there's all kinds of talent that doesn't necessarily have the experience in a particular role. That doesn't mean they don't have the skills to excel in that role. You mentioned before, like, all of these things are trainable. And I think we forget that sometimes it's more important that we find the right person that fits, as opposed to the right resume that fits. I do think, though, for that to really happen, you have to get around the resume part, which is challenging because most of these things are going through these automatic tracking systems. They automatically kick out. I've talked to a few people I know that are looking for roles, and they'll find a role that they like. It's been up for an hour and it's got 200 applications.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, well, I can go ahead and apply for this, but am I even going to get seen? And I think that is where sometimes those relationships can help, because maybe you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that works there, and you can go, hey, right, I'm trying to get seen, and maybe you can reach out to someone. I don't know the long-term answer to that, but that's definitely what I'm seeing these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing that as well. And I think it's such a great opportunity for us to use those relationship building skills that we have as customer, workers, and really leverage our community. So whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter, and, like CX Accelerator, that's a great option too. Like we all know the saying, it's who you know, like that for any, like you said, any industry. And so by asking the question, look on LinkedIn, oh, you have a mutual connection. Okay, like let's just have a conversation. It doesn't have to be awkward, or might feel that way at first, especially like the first few times you do it. You're like, oh, I don't want to bug them. Like it's kind of weird. They don't actually know them. This is like an indirect, connection. But it's like, well, if it's something that you actually want to do, how can you kind of put yourself out there a little bit, leverage your community, and just ask, because that never hurts. And for the resume part, I think especially with things like the, chat AI that's going on right now, like there's so many ways to kind of like write your resume better, or hire a professional service, or, ask someone in your network, ask a friend or a family member, or someone in the industry who, can just look it over and make sure that they're actually getting all the things that you've accomplished. I think sometimes, in roles, like we might only have a few bullet points on there, but of course we've accomplished way more than just that. And we know that, but how do you get that on paper so it can get into the right hands? But it's a tough spot to be. I feel that completely, no matter whether you have, a couple years or, a couple decades of experience. It's always going to be challenging, but knowing that, and knowing that you have a community to leverage, even if you're new to the industry, just put yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Telling the right story about what you've done is incredibly important, because if your story is, sometimes it helps to just bounce it off of someone else, because you may have blinders on or be using language that doesn't fully articulate what you've actually done. In customer experience, a lot of people are really involved with a lot of cutting edge technology, right? Is that come out in your resume? Are you talking about methodologies that you've utilized? Is that coming out in your resume? Are you talking about data analytics? If you've done anything related to that, is that showing? And so often it may be about, like, am I telling the story that I want someone to see about me, or am I telling a different story that may be more limiting? So I encourage everyone, just like you said, to get other people to look at their resume and maybe ask some questions. And there are absolutely professionals out there that can help you tell that story. And it helps to know, like, if you want to move into something different, how can I tell that story differently so it makes me more appealing?
Right. Yes, exactly. It's such a great way to put it. How can you tell the story? I mean, that right there, like that hits home. Like it just makes sense. You have to tell that story. And then sometimes you have to change your resume for each job that you apply to. And so keeping that in mind, like one doesn't fit all. Like you have to customize it. It's a full-time job looking for a job.
It is.
But if anyone's listening to this and is in, CX Accelerator or wants to reach out on LinkedIn, like I'm happy to, be the pair of eyes that looks over a resume, like for someone who might be, running into these issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll make sure, two things to put your LinkedIn contact information in the liner notes, and then also a link to CX Accelerator. Those of you who listened in on the episode with Jeremy Watkin, maybe you already joined up, but if you haven't and you're interested, I think what you're telling us, Jenny, is that they should go to the website and sign up because it's free, right?
Yes, exactly. And just join, pop in and say hi. See what you think.
Tell them Jenny sent you.
Yep, you can tell them that. I'll take the credit.
Well, Jenny, it has been so great having you on the show today. I really appreciate you taking time and talking to us about these things, which I know are very relevant to a lot of people out there. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for, having me on. Thanks for listening to, all of my questions and babbling. This is fun to talk about this. And, at the end of the day, I hope that this helps someone in their role and maybe answer some questions for them that they might have been thinking about, but haven't asked anyone yet.
You and me both. There are no bad questions.
Right. True that. Thank you, Rob.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.